Hello, underachievers. So here I am in the year of 2024 making another coming out video. You're probably really confused, or maybe you're not. I understand I already did the coming out as gay thing.
Hi.
And then the coming out as trans thing.
Hi.
And then coming out as bi when I realized I did actually like women. Hello, underachievers. I was just scared of having boobs myself. Like, we get it, Noah, you're LGBT, woo, gay rights. This is not that. This is an autism coming out video. As if most of you weren't already aware, or if you weren't already aware, you could probably guess. Since I was a wee boy, I have updated you guys on pretty much every aspect of my life. I've probably been way too TMI with most things, which I deeply regret. But I just thought this was a big one. This was definitely a big one, and the video that I posted a couple weeks ago was about me wanting to kind of change up my content because I'm so bored of it. So if you're interested in autism or autistic people, or just me in general, then maybe we'll be posting more videos about that. Before we probably get into the video, if you're living in the UK or near the UK, or you can get to the UK, you can walk there, you can swim. I have a UK tour in November, which is coming up real quick, with Taylor Acorn and South Arcade. We have VIP tickets available. A lot of them are sold out though, so if you want to meet me, you can guarantee that you can meet me for whatever reason you want to meet me. But the general admission tickets are like £20. It's really cheap, it's a real good deal, and I promise you, you'll have so much fun. If you haven't listened to my music before, it's like pop punky, pop rocky, rock. So if that's your vibe and you haven't listened to me yet, or you haven't come to a show, links are in the description. And not to be that guy, but it's very topical, I did just release a song about being autistic. It's called Pet with Autism, and it's a song based on my life around the fact that people kind of look down on me and treat me like a child because of the autism. And it's also just a fun song about some girl in my school that like called me her little gerbil, wrote a burn book. But yeah, autism! I got diagnosed in February this year, and it's now September, which I don't know why I didn't make a video earlier, but here's the big old video. I've kind of been putting this off for a while, just because, you know, being perceived in general has been strange. So for maybe the past few years, I had been, you know, maybe considering the fact that I could possibly maybe be a little bit autistic, and when I say a little bit autistic, I just mean autistic. You can't have like a little bit of autism. I've got the whole thing. I've got a complete set of autism and ADHD. But yeah, I got diagnosed with ADHD a few years ago. I could have been diagnosed with that since birth, but because my brother was way worse than me, I kind of like slid under the radar. And after I got the ADHD diagnosis, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I feel like this is helpful. Like, I take ADHD medication, which has changed my life. And you know, having the language of like things that ADHD people struggle with was very useful. But quite shortly after the ADHD diagnosis, I kind of thought that, you know, I feel like this does not explain everything about my life, about myself, about my personality, about my quirks. And I was asked, when did I start considering the fact that I might be autistic? The way that I decided to answer that question is I searched my iMessages for autism. I came upon this message from the 10th of February, 2020, so Jesus. And I say, nah, I don't think I'm autistic, like, and then a few seconds later, literally think I'm autistic, I actually cannot handle intimacy or eye contact. Now, obviously, not liking eye contact, not liking intimacy, that's not gonna get you diagnosed, but there's a lot. Like masking, sensory issues, like feeling like I'm on a completely different planet from people without realizing it. There's a lot to unpack. This video is pretty much just gonna be me going through little bits of like what the diagnosis was like how much it costs, and then there's like a Q&A at the end. So if you just want to skip to the Q&A, you don't really care about the diagnosis stuff, then skip to this time code. I had been like self-diagnosing as autistic for a couple years. I know that for like a lot of people, especially outside the UK where you don't have like accessible healthcare, a lot of people have to self-diagnose autism because it's too expensive to actually get a diagnosis. So me saying I'm diagnosed with autism is not me being like, it's official, I'm one of the true ones. Although that is how it worked in my head, because, you know, autism, black and white thinking, if I don't have the diagnosis, I can't possibly be autistic. Just want to put it out there that if you're watching this and you suspect that you have autism, or you're like pretty positive that you have autism, but you're not diagnosed, that's all good with me. I've not seen many people nowadays be like, if you don't have a diagnosis, you're faking, but like that is just, that's not what this is. But yeah, just to reference those people, I am not diagnosed from the internet. I had a proper official diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. Let's get into it. So how and where did I get diagnosed? I got diagnosed by the Adult Autism practice. The adult autism practice, which is like available for people in the UK and Ireland and like some of Europe. I think there are places outside of Europe where it's available, but like I'm from the UK, so that's all that matters to me. And I had to go privately because the NHS waitlist is insane. There would not be a chance of me getting a diagnosis anytime soon. And obviously a lot more people nowadays are getting diagnosed with autism because they know more about autism, but it also just means that there's no space in the waitlist for me, so I went private. And the adult autism practice, it says on their website it's like a 2 to 3 month wait list. It kind of was for me, maybe a little bit longer. It might be longer now, but like just for reference, if you're interested in going there. I'm going to speak about them a little bit here. I've linked it in the description. So why did I choose the adult autism practice? I spent probably like 6 months Googling places to get diagnosed and then reading everything and then getting overwhelmed with the options. And like I also have ADHD, so like getting things done, that was difficult. I think I tweeted about it and I asked, hey, anyone in the UK get a private diagnosis of autism where they didn't treat you like children? And somebody recommended me the adult autism practice. So I looked at their page, and the reasons I went with them are, number one, obviously, their diagnosis is accepted by the NHS, so it's legit. Number two, obviously, short wait list. And a big reason why I decided to go with them is because the way that they practice is through they use a neurodiversity affirming approach, which pretty much is just them saying, it's like a nice way of saying they view autism as like a different way of thinking, or like a different way that you operate rather than it being a disorder. I know a lot of people that have got diagnosed by the NHS felt like that the way that the assessors talked to them and the whole system around them treated them as if there was like something wrong with them. I know my brain is not like the average brain, but what I liked about this place that I went to is that the language that they use was just like, yeah, like if you're autistic, that's fine, you're good, there's nothing wrong with you. But I just like their approach. It seemed like friendly, nice, obviously a legit NHS diagnosis, and I feel like it was a place that I felt comfortable like actually emailing. They mentioned on their website that they've worked with like LGBT people, so like obviously being trans and being autistic, I know in a lot of cases people that were diagnosed with autism first before they tried to get on hormones. The autism may have caused issues because people are like, oh, well, you can't be trans because you're autistic. This place that I went to, they had prior experience with trans people, and they understood that just because you're autistic doesn't mean that you're like faking being trans. And I guess what kind of sold this place to me is that they have a lot of assessors that are autistic themselves, which was great. And it was really cool. Like it was just like a really nice experience. They send you a link to like all the assessors and you can choose which one you want. And some of them have like little videos introducing themselves, and like the lady I went to was just like the kindest woman in the world. So I could not recommend them enough. Obviously, because it was private, it did cost money. I think it cost me in total like £750. I'm not sure if that's gone up now, but like it was this year, so I doubt it has. But in comparison to other places, that was cheap. And I just wanted to get this diagnosis out of the way. I just needed to know. So I was going a little bit crazy, being like, oh, maybe I am, but maybe I'm not. And what if I say I am, I'm not? And yeah, I just had a lot of guilt surrounding telling people I was autistic, but maybe not. I just wanted the diagnosis, so I went with them. So before the assessment, they send you details of like everything that will happen, which obviously is someone who's autistic, very nice, because I hate doing things and going to places where I don't, like, I need an itinerary, even down to the basics of like, if you go to this building, you speak to this person at this desk. And that's kind of what this was written up like. It was like, we'll talk about this in session 1, this in session 2. These are the things that you'll be given. If you don't want to make eye contact, you don't have to. But like, it was just really affirming. But yeah, before the assessment, they have you sign in a bunch of forms, obviously. So there's like a consent form, there's an intake form, which is like, they just ask you questions like, why do you think you're autistic? Why are you going for an autism diagnosis? Family history of trauma, mental health. It pretty much just asks questions that I ended up writing, oh god, a lot. I wrote a lot. So there's the consent form, intake form, and then there's also the supplementary intake form, where either a parent or somebody that knew you when you were young, or a partner or a close friend that knows you really well now, will kind of answer the same questions that were on the intake form, or maybe little, slightly different ones. Corey did mine. I didn't ask my parents to do it. So Corey did mine. And, oh god, some of his answers were so funny. For example, if the question was like, does Noah struggle with daily tasks because of so-and-so issues, like sensory issues? And he would be like, yes, he cannot do the cooking without cleaning his hands between every single step and having everything lined up, and he gets overwhelmed when there's more than one thing on the hob. I know a lot of people that got diagnosed on the NHS maybe will think like, oh, it's private, like they cut corners. But It's very detailed. You also have to do a CAT-Q test, which is pretty much just a test that like tests how much you mask in everyday life. If you don't know what masking is, pretty much the easiest way to say it is like come across normal. Like the word mask, like you put a mask in front of your face. Masking is just like hiding your autistic traits. So they also do a CAT-Q test, which measures that, and like to be considered for an autism diagnosis, you have to score over 100. I scored 152. Anyway, next question. Oh, and you also have to fill in like this ASRS thing, which is just them like scanning you for ADHD, but I already had the diagnosis, but that's also something that you need to do. So the actual assessment itself, I had 3 assessment calls. It was all online, all on video camera. But what was really nice is she was just like, yeah, if you want to turn off your camera, that's fine. If you want to take a break, that's fine. It was real chill. But yeah, 3 assessment calls where we pretty much just go through the DSM-5. Every single point of the DSM-5 that applies to autism, we have to read through. So like an example is like, do you experience sensory overload? Or like, do you have trouble communicating with people? And it was interesting, like a lot of the things that she asked me were just like, what's your preferred form of communication? And I'm like, oh, didn't consider that, but yeah, I hate phone calls because I cannot understand tone unless I can see a person's face. But it's just stuff like that. But we went through the whole DSM-5, and after the first appointment, she was just like, yeah, so like the first appointment is kind of just, you know, to see if like this is the right journey for you, like if you should follow along for the full diagnosis. But I feel like you know and you're aware that you're definitely probably autistic, so we'll carry on. And what you're sent afterwards is a brief letter confirming autism, a clinic letter, an autism criteria mapping document, a letter in relation to equitable requirements for work, a letter for your GP, and a letter for mental health professionals. Oh, I also didn't mention that like before the assessment they do like a mental health assessment to make sure you're like doing good. But yeah, amongst the DSM-5 stuff, obviously we also had to talk about like family history, if there's anybody else in your family that's autistic or that you suspect might be autistic, and like family mental health, and specifically like traumatic events that may have caused you to like appear autistic, I guess, or like traumatic events that would like impact the diagnosis. But yeah, I might actually just make a video going through my autism diagnosis. I find it interesting. But yeah, I guess that gives you like a basic idea of what the assessment was like. Again, as I said, all links are in the description. On to the Q&A. So I asked you guys to ask me questions about the autism diagnosis and me being autistic, because you know, I know you have a lot of questions, so I'm just gonna answer them now. So I guess these 2 questions kind of cover the same thing. So the first one is, what's it like finally having that official validation, and was the diagnosis worth it? How has your life improved since getting diagnosed? I cannot express how much of a relief that was, because I feel like I had like such guilt. Even internally, like I'd feel bad, like I'd think something and I'd be like, oh, it's because I'm autistic, and then my brain would also be like, but you can't say that, but you don't know that, what if you're faking? So that was something that I had issues with, and I think it's something that a lot of people that are maybe considering a diagnosis struggle with. But like having an actual medical professional that specializes in this subject tell me, not only were you definitely on the right track when you decided to come for this diagnosis, I can say without a doubt that you are autistic. That was really great, because I feel like with the way my life is now, like I used to just post a couple videos a week and I didn't really have to interact with people unless they were my friends, and all my friends are neurodivergent. Nowadays, like because I do music, I go on tour, I do loads more things, and I get way more burnt out, and actually having the title of autistic, you know, like instead of Mr., it's just tis. I'm not gonna make that joke. It meant a lot more than I can explain, because it feels like I have spent a couple years just like reflecting on my entire life, not just to do with autism, but also just like growing up on the internet, you know, I wrote an album about that, stream it. And a lot of my childhood and a lot of stuff that I went through, or a lot of ways that I dealt with situations were like very classic autism. And without actually having a diagnosis, I just felt a little bit crazy. And was the diagnosis worth it? How has your life improved since getting diagnosed? Absolutely 100%, 1,000,000% it was worth it. I know not everybody wants that validation or like needs to know. I needed to know, and it was definitely worth it. And like, as I was saying about the way that I work, like the fact that I'm able to explain to my manager, hey, I'm autistic, by the way, and that's what this means, and this is why I struggle with, like, self-regulation, sensory overload. I have such a limited social battery that I will need to take hour-long naps after spending too much time around people. But, like, specifically for touring, like, now my tour manager knows that, like, I need my naps. Because if I don't have my naps, I'm not just going to be grumpy, I'm going to be anxious, I'm going to be stressed, and I'm not going to be able to do my job properly. And outside of work, even in, like, relation to, like, my relationships, I asked a lot of questions, I definitely over-clarified, but now the fact that I could be like, yes, I'm autistic. By the way, friend, I have no clue what you're talking about when you said this thing. Do you mean this thing? Do you mean this thing? Having the label of autistic, it makes me feel better about it, because I know that, like, My besties understand it. I don't need to explain it to them anymore because I felt like I needed to over-explain myself in every situation, especially social ones. To be honest, before I got the diagnosis, we were already like Googling like autistic accommodations, how to help with this thing. But now I know that if I'm watching TV and the washing machine is on and the lights are too bright, I can go get my you know, I can get my noise-cancelling earplugs things because I get really overwhelmed by auditory stuff. Obviously, like, because I'm trans, so much of my life has just been like, what is up with me? Like, what is going on? Figured out the trans thing, and I was like, okay, the gender thing makes sense. The ADHD thing, I feel like it's improved my life because, like, I finally have, like, a somewhat full picture of the way that my brain works. And, like, back to, like, relationships and, like, friendships, a thing that happens because of the autism is I will take everything literally. So, like, when there's a discussion or, like, maybe a bit of an argument, I will take everything that everybody says literally, which means that I get stuck on things that people didn't mean to say, or I misunderstand people, and my brain just gets stuck. So now that people around me have the understanding that it's probably because of autism, we can actually, like, pick at that thing and be like, okay, so why are you specifically stuck on me saying this thing? What does that mean to you? What do you assume that I meant by that? And what do you think, like, what is the actual reason that I said this thing? It's pretty much just meant that I can be more kind to my brain and to myself. Next question is, did you ever have a medical professional tell you it's just social anxiety and ADHD? Yes. My therapist, my old therapist, who I dumped. My old one, like, his approach was kind of like, everything that you struggle with is due to your childhood trauma. And I was like, okay, my guy, I understand that the childhood trauma did this, but I don't think that explains this. And pretty much, he was like, I don't think you're autistic because we're sat here having a conversation and you're making eye contact. And I'm like, yes, I've had to train myself how to make eye contact. He made me buy this book called, like, The Hypersensitive Person, which I found out a lot of autistic girls have been told that they're just hypersensitive, that they're anxious, that, you know, they're just, like, not weak, but that's kind of what's implied. So I bought this book, The Hypersensitive Person, and I read it, and I was just like, I'm not just sensitive. My brain fundamentally works differently than how it seems everybody else's does. So I ended up dumping that therapist, and I was like, yeah, you've really helped with the trauma stuff, but I feel like you don't know anything about autism. He was like, yeah, I mean, to be fair. Do you find your autism has made any part of your transition harder? Not at all. I feel like it would be different if I got the autism diagnosis before the gender dysphoria diagnosis, because as I said earlier, a lot of people are just like, oh, if you're autistic, then you're not trans, you just think you're a boy because you're autistic. So luckily, that never got in the way. It's a hard thing to talk about because a lot of trans people are autistic, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For a little bit, I had a concern that I would be worried that I wasn't trans because of the autism. That thought lasted about 2 milliseconds, and I was just like, how the f would me being autistic make a difference? Like, I felt like this my whole life. My brain has worked this way my whole life. Even if the transgenderness is because of autism, the conclusion of that is that it doesn't matter, because this is the way that I feel comfortable, this is the way that I operate in the world. So yeah, like, it never got in the way, really. I was more worried that it would get in the way than it actually getting in the way. How did your parents react about it? The thing with autism, I think, especially nowadays, is people have this, like, preconceived notion of what being autistic is. Like, you have, like, your Sheldon Coopers. And obviously, because autistic people suffer with, like, social interaction to, like, varying degrees. Some people you'll meet that are autistic are the most, like, charismatic people that you would never suspect they're autistic. But, you know, because a lot of the people that are portrayed in media as being autistic are just, like, incredibly awkward, like, can't function. And that's not to say that, like, there aren't autistic people that are like that. Obviously there are. Like, I went to school with autistic people like that. But I think my parents struggled with the idea of me being like that. As in, like, I can't be autistic because I'm not, like, Sheldon Cooper. There's also a massive conversation to be had about, like, people raised as women or girls. Their autism is very different because girls are, you know, from birth kind of taught to be sweet and loving and nice and sociable, which means that a lot of women or people, like, raised as girls go undiagnosed for a long time because, like, we've kind of learned how to mask real good. Like, I've been told, hey, everybody else's comfort matters more than you, so yeah, of course I'm gonna be extra nice and I'm gonna force myself to make the eye contact. And I've gotten to the point where I'm, like, physically incapable of being impolite. So yeah, I definitely don't fit the stereotype of Sheldon Cooper man autism. And I had to have a conversation with them, and I was like, oh god, like, it was like an info dump where I was just like, actually, not all autistic people are like that, and this is what the DSM-5 actually says, and this is what it's actually about, and sensory issues. And after, like, 1 or 2 conversations with them, they're like, oh, okay, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's why you would only eat plain pasta with cheese for every single meal. That's why you refuse to eat sauce. That's why you would gag when you tried things that smelt too much or the texture was off. Like, they weren't closed-minded about it. I think they were just like, I don't think you're autistic. I was worried a lot about that, to be honest, because I know that, like, they have a very, like, specific view of what being autistic is. But, like, everybody in my family is neurodivergent, so, like, I would not be surprised if they went for an assessment.
Well, Alice, it seems we both got autism, haven't we?
Yeah.
Did you self-doubt it or self-gaslight? As in, did you gaslight yourself into thinking you weren't autistic? I kind of spoke about that earlier. But yeah, I thought, like, because I can make eye contact with people, I can't be autistic. And the sensory issues are just from ADHD. I would, like, gaslight myself into thinking I wasn't autistic, and then the next day I'd be like, oh god, things are hard in a way that only autistic people would find things being hard. How's the tism shown on a daily basis? I was thinking of making a video like that, like, because I did a day in the life with ADHD, which you can watch on my channel. That was fun. I think I want to do that for autism. Maybe, like, vlog where, like, every time something happens because of autism, I take a drink. Not that. Definitely not that. If my room isn't tidy and everything isn't in its place, I physically cannot do anything. Obviously clothes with specific seams or like clothes with labels, sensory nightmare, so they need to be cut off. I pretty much wear the exact same pair of socks. Not the exact same pair of socks. I have like 30 pairs of the same socks that I'm like, okay, these are comfortable, I can do these. And then when it comes to food, breakfast, there are specific textures that I can't eat. It's a lot of the time hard to finish a full meal because I will get like bored of a specific texture halfway through, and then I have to like force it down. People don't really think about their day like that. Neurotypical people don't look at their day like, oh god, now I have to eat breakfast. Oh god, where are my socks? If something smells different, if it's too loud, if the temperature's not right, I am physically incapable of getting comfortable for more than like 3 minutes because I can feel the way that like my body is resting on things and I can't deal with that. And that's even without really talking much about socializing. I have such a limited social battery, I get exhausted when I talk to people that I don't really know. I feel like the way I explain it best is like, I feel like I do everything manually, whereas like people have conversations with other people, they're like, oh yeah, they're looking them in the eye, they know what to say, whereas like when I interact with people that I don't know, I'm like making a very obvious effort to make eye contact and nod whenever they talk so they know I'm listening. That's like the 2% of things that affect me every day because of autism, but that's I guess that's not really something people have heard about. Like, yeah, I wake up and you know, I can't eat the Weet-Bix because I ate that for the past 6 weeks and now it makes me throw up. What were the signs that seem obvious now but were missed when you were a child? This is something that like I've seen a couple people talk about, the fact that like autistic people, some of them treat everybody the same. That's how my brain works. Like I will treat everybody as if they're my friend, which as a kid just meant that like I had friends and people were nice to me, but when I was getting bullied I didn't realize because I thought people were being nice to me because I didn't understand, because the autism I didn't pick up on like the tone that they were putting across wasn't friendly. I'll probably make a proper video just about this because there's way too much to talk about for just one video. Last question is, do you have an extremely small social battery, and if so, how do you deal with it? Help me. I have a very small social battery, which obviously means that like VIP and like touring is so overwhelming.
I go through hell touring.
What helps with it is just napping, to be honest, and taking days for yourself where you don't have to interact with people if you're able to do that. If you have a weekend where you're like, okay, Saturday I'll see people, Sunday I will stay at home and not speak to anybody. I feel like with a lot of these things, it's like the most helpful thing you can do to yourself and for yourself is explain to others what's going on. I'm exhausted right now because I spent a lot of time speaking to people and yeah. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Happy autism. Check out my brand new song, Pet with the Tism, and come see me on tour in November if that's something you want to do. Links in the description. Alright, have a good day, alright? See you later, losers. Goodbye.